Order, order, order. Welcome everybody to our combined authority meeting today, and after the day after the government's levelling up white paper. Well, this is West Yorkshire's approach to levelling up, and we will hopefully have a good discussion throughout the day. So thank you very much. Dominic, any apologies today?
We've had apologies from Councillor Lawson and Councillor Jeffrey, but their subs are present.
Thank you so much. And declarations of interest, anyone, anything to declare? No, thank you. So moving on, thank you. So the minutes of December the 9th, exclusion of press and public. There are no items that are going to this meeting identified as including exempt information. So our two observers are welcome. Item 4, minutes of the December the 9th meeting. Any further comments or questions? Are we content to see these as accurate? We are. Lovely. Thank you so much. So moving on to item number 5, the economic recovery. We know that the pandemic has had a significant impact on households and communities across West Yorkshire. We know how much families and individuals have suffered, and also the damage to our economy. So this is a really timely report because it summarises how our local economy is faring and how it's beginning to recover as we come out of the pandemic. It also reports progress on some of the programmes and services to support the ongoing recovery, and the latest COVID-19 grants for businesses affected by the Omicron variant, the delivery of the new £6 million entrepreneurship programme, which I'm hugely proud of, and the £13.5 million strategic employment and skills package, both funded via the West Yorkshire Single Investment Fund to support delivery of the economic recovery plan. So the recommendation in the report is to note progress and developments. And if I could pass over to Brian Archer, Director of Economic Services, to take us through some of the main points. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take the paper as read, but just highlight some of the main points with regards to the economic recovery. The biggest challenge at the moment is the energy price cap, which is likely to increase consumer bills by around 50%. The consequences of that are going to be an increase in inflation, which is already at 5.5%. And that will impact on the spending power of consumers to the tune of 20 billion. Business energy costs are increasing. They rose 22% in the last quarter, and a third of businesses are looking to pass that on to consumers. Another headwind that our businesses are facing is with regard to the cost of energy. UK firms are paying £30 per megawatt hour more than our European competitors. And one of the other challenges is obviously the energy suppliers themselves, who are constrained in their ability to invest in the low carbon transition, because obviously the cap hasn't kept pace with wholesale costs. 28 energy providers have folded today. On the labour market, we've got 80,000 people out of work in West Yorkshire and 170,000 people that are still in work that's paying less than the living wage. So some real headwinds for our communities across West Yorkshire. In work claimants on universal credit, we've seen an increase of 133%, which colleagues will have noted in the report. However, having said that, the labour market's very tight at the moment. We are seeing employment improve, and employment figures have increased in all local authority areas, although recruitment activity is starting to slow down. In terms of our response business support, £870 million in grants has been dispersed by local authorities with support of the growth hubs and the growth managers. And the government announced a further £1 billion to support the retail and hospitality sector in December. And that takes the form of a series of grants based on the rateable value of the organisation. On skills, yesterday the government announced another £550 million for adult skills boot camps, We are seeing quite strong demand for through the employment hubs for the skills boot activity. I'll stop at that, Mayor, if I may, and happy to take questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And certainly the 170,000 people who are in work but being paid below the living wage, and the combination of rising fuel costs and then the national insurance rise is going to be incredibly challenging for the people of West Yorkshire. That's why I think it's really important that the work that's ongoing on the Fair Work Charter that really does gather speed, because it's really an urgent piece of work that we try and get more money into people's pockets. I wonder if I could just flag up that we've done really well on our EDI targets on the entrepreneurship program, something I'm really pleased to see around entrepreneurs who have disabilities, people of colour are coming forward to join this program. So I thank the teams who've been rolling that out and reaching out to our communities all across West Yorkshire. So thank you for that. Would anybody like to make any comments on Brian's presentation? Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yeah, I think it's just obviously it's a very tricky time, isn't it, for the nation and for our economy. And I think everything that Brian said then, as outlined in the paper, screams investment in skills to me. And I know obviously from an economic recovery point of view, Mayor, you've already put some work in there in skills and gain share. Obviously going to be skills in there as well in the future. But I just think flexibility in the future to make sure we can invest as much as we need to in skills. So you've got people in low paid employment. Obviously, they need to access higher paid employment, perhaps with the right access to training and skills, working with employers, and also people who without work, too much unstable employment out there with little opportunity to progress. And that's something we need to work with employers on to really crack that. And I say invest in our people. There's nothing more important.
Thank you. And certainly investing in people is something that's a priority, and being able to be flexible, as you say, Councillor Hinchcliffe, when the bus operators were saying they were struggling to deliver their timetable because of the shortage of bus drivers, we were able to then support them with training, and the same with HGV drivers. We are here to help business and to work in partnership to support skills training and getting more money into people's pockets with better jobs. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you're quite right to make that point where we have supported the bus companies in West Yorkshire. As you see right across West Yorkshire and Kirklees, where we're seeing bus services cancelled. It's been becoming a bit of a nightmare. It's a bus crisis. So I think we need to reiterate that to the bus services that we've supported them. They need to support us and the communities that they're serving now.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions for Brian, if that's okay. The report mentions footfall data. It'd be useful to know some of the spending data, where people are spending the money. We know that there's been difficulties in terms of people's domestic budgets, so fuel, mortgages, with the rise in interest rates, but I'm interested in their spending in different sectors of the West Yorkshire economy. The second is about journeys of people. We've got a lot of information about starts, so people from different backgrounds starting different courses. I'm interested in that journey, so where they're going to, what jobs they're getting, are they moving from low pay, as Councillor Hinchcliffe said, to high pay jobs? I think that's the really important bit underneath the report.
Yeah, really good point in terms of destinations, and we do track through all our programmes, particularly adult education budget, commission skills activity, destinations of learners in terms of further progression into higher level courses or progression into other employment related activity. So we are able to get that data. I'll defer, if I may, to Tom with regards to tracking discretionary spending. I know we track footfall, but Tom, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Thank you. So on the footfall, as it stands, the plan is just to look at footfall. However, there will be some elements of kind of proxying that we can use, whereby we'll be able to see if someone comes to, say, for example, Leeds, how long they spend in the area, whereabouts in Leeds they are. So whilst that won't be a perfect match for discretionary spending, it should be able to give us kind of an idea of the economic activity. In terms of the figures to actually get spending data, that's something we're looking at going forward. It's something that, as it stands, we're focusing on the footfall side of things, just so we can see sort of how footfall's recovering in the economic recovery. Are certain areas or certain high streets seeing more people, or a return of more people, or are there certain areas particularly struggling? But in terms of the discretionary spending, for the time being, it will be more of a proxy, but going forward, it's something that we are looking at because we think it would be a very valuable source of data.
Sir Roger Marsh.
Thank you. I think we all acknowledge the challenges facing the economy and the business community as well as individuals. But actually to perhaps look at a rather more positive, and there's also a question as to whether we need to do some more detailed work as a combined authority. All the conversations I've had with businesses since the turn of the year, including those who might wish to come and be here, is their challenge is actually finding enough skilled people to fill the roles they've got for business as is, rather than any growth aspirations. And I wonder, because I do agree skills has been an issue for not just a minute, it's been an issue for several years, if not more than a decade. I wonder whether we need to get really under the skin of this, understanding as a combined authority a degree of granularity by geography, by sector, by type of role, and help to further triangulate with our skills providers locally, both HE and FE, to what extent there are further things we could put into the recipe to ensure that our continued success in attracting businesses to the region isn't at the expense of existing businesses, making the problem worse, but also enables us to say, you needn't fret, we have a ready pool, or at least we can be confident about it. And I think about major business that may want to, in time, recruit over 2,000 people from an already tight labour market. That said, question then those who are not in the labour market, are there other things we need to do in addition to what we've done already? So for me, I think it's getting some depth and granularity so that we could be perhaps even more targeted in our medium-term approach.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. We'll take that away. And certainly just to say to businesses in West Yorkshire, if you're having a challenge in recruitment around one particular skill, come to us, because we are hoping that we can be flexible and be responsive in an agile way swiftly to give you that pipeline of skilled workforce. We don't know every demand, what every business needs, so we need that relationship, and that's why the LEP is so important in our understanding as well, because you feed directly back to us from the coalface of business. So that relationship hopefully will continue, and we can understand what you need.
Might I respond? I think I'm delighted to say that in recent announcements from the centre that not only should it continue and prosper, but very pleasingly, I think, to all of the colleagues around the table, officers and otherwise, that the model we've developed appears to be the model answer that government seems to think others should at least look at, if not adopt, in due course.
Wise words as always. Councillor Pandor.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just like to reinforce what Sir Roger said regarding the future of LEPs. I think we've got a good framework since I've been on this body and in my new role leading the Business Economy and Innovation panel. I'm really pleased that there is a future for the LEPs, and the model we have led by Roger has been one of the best, I would say, in the country. And I think it might be worth, Mayor, that we actually get that message out there to the private sector as quickly as possible, that we've got a big program of activity. We are still in there, and we can only flourish and address the issue that we're talking about by working in partnership with the private sector. It's a given. And I'm really pleased that, we have a solid framework. And let's get out there and get the message out there that we want to address the issues head on, and that's what we are here for, to make sure that we address all the issues that we talk about. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, everyone. Any more further comments? No. Are we happy to note the progress of the economic recovery in West Yorkshire? Yes, we are. Lovely. Thank you so much. So moving on to item 6, which is the budget and business planning. Well, this is my first budget, so I'm really pleased to be in this seat doing this. The paper sets out our overall approach to the budget, how we intend to spend the money we have at our disposal, and obviously the priorities for our organisation. It helps to deliver on my 10 manifesto pledges, which looked very like the 12 missions from government only yesterday. And the report looks back on some of the successes we've already had. The delivery of the £6 million entrepreneurship package of support, the fair deal for young people, capping single fares at 120 across the region, and securing £830 million worth of sustainable transport funding through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, which obviously we couldn't have been eligible for without being a mayoralty and without devolution. Also establishing the £6 million Skills Connect programme, which I referenced earlier, free, flexible training courses to get people into work. Frustratingly, I was hoping we'd be able to set out how much money we were going to get from government to deliver our bus service improvement plan for our London-style bus service that we want to achieve. And I was also hoping we'd be able to spell out how much money we'd be allocated from the Shared Prosperity Fund, from my understanding, which is sadly going to be less than the EU funding that it's replacing. However, yesterday's Levelling Up white paper also didn't deliver on any of these details. However, that said, there are things to welcome in the white paper, and the missions set out by government align with many of my objectives in West Yorkshire. The commitments to deepen powers for mayors, strengthening the hand of local leaders is to be welcomed. And obviously promises around simplifying and rationalising funding pots and reducing the number of short-term beauty contests for time-limited pots of money is obviously a good thing. The proof, as always, is in delivery, and it requires all of government, in particular the Treasury, to back the plan. It cannot just be Michael Gove talking about levelling up. It has to be every single governmental department working towards delivering equity across the country. The shame is that the one new bit of money confirmed, the £22 million in the Brownfield Land Fund, commissioned by Michael Gove's own department, is still coming with all the same strings and the restrictions that we previously had. So we'll do what we normally do. We'll roll up our sleeves and deliver, but this lack of freedoms and flexibilities in the various pots of funding available does hold us back from our ambitions. So this paper is asking for the combined authorities' approval on the proposed revenue budget and the transport levy for 22-23 and the indicative capital budget and programme and Treasury management statement. So if Angela Taylor, Director of Corporate and Commercial Services, could take us through details in the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for a great introduction to the paper. I'll go through some of the key points in it. So you've already started off there with the first section about some of the key successes of the year, which is very much despite the challenges we had in setting the budget last year with so many unknowns and the pandemic. From paragraph 2.4 onwards, you've got some information on our business plans. Appendix 1 sets out a draft business plan for each of our directorates. There's further work to do to refine those. We want to make sure, for example, we can see equality and diversity and inclusion throughout all of them. And we're also looking at whether the 5 corporate priorities previously agreed are still the right fit for the shape and size of organisation. So comments welcome on the drafts, and we'll be bringing these back for further approval in the, hopefully to the March meeting. Appendix 2 gives an updated revenue position for the current year, some relatively small one-off savings, some on staff vacancies where we've not been able to fill all of the posts, and some small savings on concessionary travel. In line with conversation at previous meetings, we're proposing that goes in a ring-fenced reserve to help support the risks and challenges of funding the bus industry come the end of government funding. I'll return to in a moment. Appendix 3 then sets out the proposed revenue budget for 2022-23. It does build on previous reports to this committee and decisions made here, also input from Finance Resources Committee and scrutiny have been through this as well. It's been a really difficult year to set this budget. I'm sure this has been echoed in similar meetings throughout the country. There's still gaps in our funding, as the Mayor mentioned before. We're hoping to have some answers for some of the items in the levelling up paper, and obviously we'll have to wait to see what they are. We know one of the biggest risks facing us is around bus. The government's bringing to an end its funding that it's been providing throughout the pandemic. Travel patterns aren't what they were before the pandemic, and we know operators, again, already mentioned by some of the members, that operators are taking action, reviewing the bus services that they provide, and in some cases already starting to withdraw those. And we're waiting for the outcome of the bus service improvement plan bid, again, which the Mayor referenced earlier. We have, however, left the transport levy at the same level. It's very hard to increase that. It is funded by the 5 local authorities who are all going through their own very challenging budget setting sessions. So we're proposing the transport levy fixed at its current level. We have also proposing keeping our reserves slightly higher at 10 million. It's not a huge amount, but it might give us a little bit of leeway next year to help face some of the challenges we know are coming. Appendix 4 gives you the indicative capital income and expenditure position for the next 3 years. It only reflects approved funding at this stage. So, for example, the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund, we've got an indicative figure. We don't have that finally confirmed. A business case has gone back to government for that. So that will get added in, as will the brownfield housing funding we got yesterday. That will get added in. So we'll keep this updated throughout the year. And we obviously hope that the income on that line will increase and give us more spending power. Last but not least, Appendix 5 is your Treasury management statement. It's had some minor updates for some of the organisational changes in the last year, but nothing substantively changed in terms of our approach to Treasury management. And this is being considered by Governance and Audit Committee. Recommendations are set out on page 44 of the pack, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Paulson.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, really. One on the reserves policy, the 10 million at 5%. Obviously, we are a different organisation to a local authority. We don't have some of the statutory services like social care, etc., to fund. So I guess that is a lower level percentage-wise than a local authority. And where does that sit against other combined authorities? Do we know around the country? And the second one is mention, obviously, we're carrying over a number of vacancies in staffing. Trying to get the people with the right skills ourselves can be a problem. But we've also increased posts in line with the organisation getting bigger. So there is a bit of a balance there. So where are we with staffing and costs on that? How many staff do we have extra now than we had when we were setting the budget this time last year? So thank you.
Angela?
Thank you. In terms of reserves, the approach to reserves is a risk-based one. There's often a figure between 5 and 10% is taken as a sort of starting point. It does, the right figure to set is one that reflects the relative risks to different parts of your activities, and the opportunity to raise income in the year, which for us is extremely limited. So this is a bit higher than we've had before. In terms of how it compares to others, we've checked against combined authorities. They vary. Some have somewhat more than us. Some have a bit less. In terms of local authorities, it's very hard to compare. There's lots of different types of reserves that, because of the way local authorities are funded, there's sometimes some specific reserves for specific areas of service. For me, setting this, it doesn't feel an extortionate amount to have set aside for a year. We spend 500 million a year. 10 million is a relatively small amount, and we wouldn't spend it without coming back to the combined authority to report on the need to use it. So it won't just get, it would never get frittered away or just get spent to surprise you next year when we bring it back. So we hope to be able to keep them intact, and we'll review then next year what we need. In terms of staffing, you're absolutely right. We both need people and we struggle to recruit people. And we're not alone in that. In terms of movement in headcount, I don't have the figures in front of me. I'll check them for you. we've certainly taken on or created more posts in the last year. Much of that follows funding, and that's always been the case, that where we've got additional responsibilities, additional services, additional projects, the numbers do increase. So that they have gone up. I'll check the figures for you and let you know.
Also, we're taking on the police and crime workforce as well, so there will be a particular boost around those numbers in comparison to previous years. Ben.
Will it? Thank you, Chair. It's just to because I do have the numbers to hand to save Angela doing a note, Councillor Paulson. So so last year the Command Authority grew by 13%, and we're now approaching 657 FTEs. When we started in we started in November 2016 with about 454 people.
Thank you. Sir Roger.
Forgive me, Mayor and colleagues, but if anybody presents me with a table of numbers, I can't help myself. It's a very detailed question, just to understand the variance between the Q2 final year forecast and the revised budget for the current year, and how it feeds into the budgets for next year and beyond. And if I can just refer to page 55 of Appendix 2, and I say it is a detailed question, but it was the percentage change that that struck me on supplies and services, which is a very generic term. I just wonder whether there's any aspect of that that was either recurring in future years or was just one-off in the current year because of the circumstances, and it may be COVID-related costs, but you know, a nearly 60% increase from what we were forecasting at the end of Q2 caught my attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Very good question, Sir Roger. The table on that page, the revised budget, is the changes that have been made in year since we approved the budget last year. The column on the right is the revised forecast as at Q2, which we don't believe should change substantially. It's based on the Q2 figures and known changes. The line you refer to is a bit of a catch-all, and one of the things we're looking to do in the current year is get a better way of presenting back to you this information. We're putting a new finance system in, which will bring some really much improved reporting, and some of these lines that have become the best line we've got to capture certain costs that don't fit neatly elsewhere. We will be sorting those out into something better for you. That line ends up being the spend, for example, on projects we're funding through gain share, where we're spending that money with third parties, or it's grant money we're giving back out to other authorities. So it's a bit of a catch-all that will fluctuate depending on the particular project that we've added into the budget in year. I can provide you a more detailed breakdown. There is more information beneath it.
When is that new programme going to be rolled out? Or that
the new finance system, it is due to go live at the end of this calendar year. So we'll be hopefully be able to test out some different reporting and bring it back over the coming months to you.
Thank you. Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Mayor. And it was to pick up on an early comment that you'd made in relation to uncertainty on the Shared Prosperity Fund. I think that that's going to have a tremendous impact, recognising there's no hard border in the economy between York and West Yorkshire, and therefore it's something that a lot of people are employed in projects which rely upon that, and to have uncertainty at this late stage is not helping anybody in terms of planning ahead. So the question really is, how do we work together as a North to respond to that and say we need to see the figures?
Well, certainly the mayors across the north and across the country, we are working together where we have these challenges. One example is the cliff edge of the COVID recovery bus funding. We've written to government to say we're all facing this challenge with bus companies potentially cutting routes because they're of that uncertainty and lack of clarity. But very happy to talk further about how we can support York in that conversation. And obviously there's going to be opportunities for York around devolution going forward, which we celebrate and want to help where we can. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Mayor. I was interested in the costs
that are listed for professional services and consultancy. And I'm just wondering whether or not, given the announcement that's been made in the Levelling Up paper, they would be posts or, sorry, disciplines or expertise that we might want to create posts for in-house. And I asked the question, the context is, I know that previously in the past, we've had to bring in this kind of expertise to help with our bids. And if, I know that the Levelling Up paper said that there would be less of the municipal beauty contest going forward, but as you just pointed out there, the only new money in that announcement actually does come with a bidding process. And if this is likely to be the status quo going forward, instead of actually contracting these from outside suppliers, maybe we need to look at bringing them in-house, if that is indeed what these extra costs for professional services and consultancy are.
I would say our challenge is matching those salaries of people in consultancies outside of organisations like combined authorities. But Angela.
Thank you. I mean, that line in the budget, again, it refers back to Sir Roger's comment. It is a bit of a catch-all. So it's not necessarily just buying in expertise for particular projects, although we do obviously do that. If we believe we have enough recurring need, we'll try to bring a post in. That it's always cheaper to do that, but often we need something quite specific for a certain amount of time. In terms of bids, we do much of our bid writing in-house. We do sometimes get external support. But the teams have, because of the nature of how funding is awarded, they've become quite skilled at bid writing, and it is something that we occasionally do buy in bits of support for that. But I think our colleagues around the table who are quite skilled at doing this and have been doing so for the last few years. So we could obviously, if it changed, we will look at, we need more specialisms in house.
Ben, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I did expect that this issue might get raised when discussing the budgets, and what I'll do is circulate a version of the revenue budget paper that separates out both the suppliers and services and the professional services and consultancy tables into different categories. What that shows you is that the majority, I think it's just over half of both those rows, are actually expenditure on economic services programs. So they are the providers of those programs, or the expertise, such as specialist legal or strategic support that is provided to companies in West Yorkshire. So it's not all about staff within the combined authority, it's also about programs delivery as well.
Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Mayor. It's just back to the point you raised with the buses and the fact that government funding is going to dry up basically for that as well moving forward. We're seeing cuts already, as I said before, in the Wakefield district. The fact that bus companies have tried to leave a major town in Ossett with no bus connect link to Leeds has been absolutely unbelievable. And thank you to yourself and to Kim Groves for supporting us and the community campaign to get that 117 service back online again. But it's also the fact that where the service will be reduced are some of our poorest communities. When I think of the southeast, the Wakefield district, your South Kirby's, your South Emsals, them areas where actually sometimes they don't always look towards West Yorkshire, and they always look to South Yorkshire, then cross boundary buses as well. I think it's something we need to really get a grasp of. But for the fact of the government to turn their backs on the bus services at this time when we need to be encouraging public confidence in the bus services, to cut the funding is absolutely unbelievable. Thank you.
I do agree that a really good bus route is the key to levelling up, and enabling people to get to jobs and opportunities is key. So thank you for that. Any further comments? No. We're happy to agree the recommendations as set out in this report. Good stuff. Thank you so much. Moving on to item 7, which moves us on talking from the budget to the funding priorities. This is about how we're going to use the gain share. You all know what the gain share is, the 38 million flexible funding pot we get as part of the devolution deal, and to make sure that we're delivering on my manifesto pledges to the people of West Yorkshire, which have been embedded and aligned with the investment priorities. I'm so delighted that we're proposing an indicative commitment of £40 million, a quarter of the revenue element of the gain share, to the climate emergency. It really does represent the single biggest investment we've made as a region to tackle the biggest issue we face as a society. If we're going to meet our commitment of net zero by 2038, we need to be acting now in the 2020s. And the West Yorkshire Climate and Environment Plan sets out how we're going to get there. The mayors and us, we can be the speedboats that turn the tankers of Westminster around to focus on this challenge. Of course, we know that this is just the start. We need to work with partners to secure the rest of the funding to ensure everyone in our region benefits from the transition to net zero. What's really important as well is that this plan commits to providing that 10% top slice to add capacity for our local authority partners to develop the pipeline of projects which will help deliver on our ambitions. We know how hard it's been after a decade of cuts to local government. So we're using this money to support you as our partners and to deliver on capacity to help you deliver your projects. So the way we've allocated the gain share means we'll be geared up to deliver on the pledges I made to the public, including 1,000 well-paid jobs for young people, tackling the climate emergency, ensuring everyone in West Yorkshire has the skills they need to work, and of course, delivering on the Creative New Deal. And on that, I'm thrilled we're able to commit 11.5 million to culture and creative activities across the region. And it's the first time we've had a dedicated pot of funding at the regional level to support the cultural sector across West Yorkshire. And there was a fair bit of commentary around a paper that was written by Professor Katie Shaw around culture as the key to levelling up. And I would recommend, if you have a moment, to have a read of that, because it's very powerful how culture can make a difference. We as a committee, the Cultural Committee, have already started to develop plans of how we deploy our pot of funding. And I'm really looking forward to sharing all of those with you very soon, placing the emphasis on mass participation across the region, engaging as many people as possible, and ensuring that culture is accessible to all. So this report seeks to approve indicative revenue funding envelopes against each of the investment priorities within West Yorkshire investment strategy for the financial years 21-22 and 24-25. So I'd like to invite Alan Rees, Director of Strategy, Communications and Policing, to present the paper. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor. So just to add a few points to what you have already said. So as the Mayor referred to, the Single Investment Fund and West Yorkshire Investment Strategy approach have previously been agreed by the Combined Authority, and the investment priorities are set across the 6 areas outlined in the paper, which I won't read, but they've been already, reference has been made so far to growing businesses, skills, the climate, culture, and so on. We're already delivering programs funded by Gain Share that are set out in the Economic Recovery Report discussed earlier. This is the next step. So it's intended that in the medium term, there'll be a pipeline of overarching programs and projects for every investment priority that we develop across the region. In order to enable that, what this paper proposes is that there's an initial indicative funding allocation made to each of the investment priorities aimed at supporting levelling up across the region and strengthening the region as a globally competitive economy. And the fact that this is one large chunk of money being approved for 3 years it will enable us to plan. So the proposed funding envelopes have, of course, been developed in partnership between the Combined Authority and local authorities. And the programs and pipelines that are being developed will place us in a strong position to respond to wider funding streams that we expect to be coming down the track. For instance, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which mention was made of yesterday, but the allocation was not made of. In terms of the next step, developing the detail of these pipelines, proposals will be coming forward to committees for them to discuss, and they'll be based on the strategies and policies that have already been agreed, for instance, the Climate and Environment Plan. In addition to all that, During the partnership discussions, and some references already been made to skills and capacity requirements across the region, it's been identified that we do need additional capacity within both the combined authority and the local authorities in order to develop these pipelines of schemes to meet our priorities, and therefore we're seeking approval of 10% of the gain share to be shared amongst the partners to build capacity and skills and develop pipelines. And just to reiterate, these are indicative allocations so that we can proceed with the work to develop the pipelines, but remain flexible, taking account of new funding streams and move money around priorities depending on what additional funding becomes available. Thank you, Mayor. I'll stop there.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess for Alan, on Appendix 1, I'm just trying to understand the table a bit better. The allocation for 21-22 that's there for revenue funding is 28.5 million, but we have a carry forward to the following year of 23.6. Given everything that we've heard this morning about fuel bills, people struggling, this money isn't going out the door quick enough, it would seem. Is that the case, or are we just putting funding aside when we require more certainty for future projects?
So that funding, the carry forward funding, is included within the overall package that we're seeking agreement of, and there is a need for us to develop the pipelines and programs in more detail before it can then be released out of the door. And this is there is some risk here, which is why we're proposing to over program so that additional funding is allocated more than we actually have, so that if there are delays to projects that come through, there is some mitigation of that risk.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up then, yeah, because I was crunching the numbers as we're looking at this, and stuff wasn't adding up. We were definitely asking for more in terms of projects than the funding that was allocated. I think the risk then is that we start to say, well, you know, the government should provide this funding. Actually, this is from the gain share, and we are in charge of this. We could get this out the door as quickly as possible, really. And I'm keen to make sure that everything we've heard this morning, we're expediting that as quick as possible. I don't think the people of West Yorkshire can wait, and I think to see 23 million that's sat there not going out the door already when we're coming to the end of this year is a bit of a concern.
So the gain share is aimed at developing the region's economic development principally, and it's important that we, as far as possible, use it for providing services that are going to help people develop skills, grow jobs, tackle the climate emergency, etc. And actually, whilst accepting the fact that the funding has not all been spent this year, and it won't all be spent this year, actually, the program that we're developing is aimed at ensuring that over the course of the next 3 years, we are able to spend the totality of that funding. However, if there is if there is overrun, one of the advantages with the gain share, of course, is that we have that flexibility. So, and over the next couple of years, as we develop, one of the things that we're doing with the capacity funding that's going to all local authorities is developing a longer term pipeline of infrastructure, and the revenue that is within the gain share will enable us to borrow in order to fund that program. So if there is some funding that is left over at the end of the 3 years, that can go into that larger pot and enable us to do more.
Thank you. Sir Roger.
Thank you. And that's Councillor Robinson's quite right to raise the concern. And I'm not here to allay concerns, but just to reflect on my own experience of the 6-year programme of local growth funding, where we had much greater freedoms and flexibilities. And there was a stage where we weren't spending in terms of the government's cash flow plan, rather than our approach was to allocate public money and spend it well for the long term, not to meet some sort of central Treasury budget. And so I can endorse what Alan has said, but we need to keep our focus on and keep our foot to the gas, so to speak. But I think our challenge will be ensuring we have enough money to do things rather than perhaps leaving something left on the table at the end. But it'll be long after my own time. But if anything, the experience I've had hopefully might provide some reassurance to colleagues, and it'll be for you to make sure that's made good, I guess. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I really am pleased that we are over programming in a way. So we've got more ideas, more opportunity to develop great projects, because we don't know of the funding that's coming down the track. So there will be a bit of ebb and flow about spend, and you can't always spend on a big project at the end of the financial year. That has to carry over because the bill is coming in the second year. So as you know, I'm teaching you how to suck eggs there, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you. Just wanted to check how much flexibility the local authorities will have with this funding that's going to be provided. And for instance, will they be targeted on a certain amount of schemes or a certain percentage of schemes? So obviously different authorities have got different priorities as well going forward, and are all different sizes as well.
Thank you. Alan.
Do you mean excuse me, Councillor, do you mean the capacity funding or the wider programmes? The capacity funding. So with the capacity funding, they have local authorities will have a very significant amount of flexibility, but we as in the combined authority and all partners agree that it's important to set out, in order to release that funding, what the expectation is in terms of what's provided. So so setting out what the So we're setting out what should be expected to be produced, but not necessarily how the money should be spent. So significant flexibility in how, but it is important that that funding is used to produce that longer term pipeline and develop skills within each organisation.
Because the challenge has always been that the funding, it gets announced, and we want to have as many brilliant projects as possible, really well developed, in order to take that opportunity for funding so that we can win every bid that we go in for. Any further comments? Are we happy to confirm our agreement to the recommendations set out? Thank you so much. Brilliant. Okay, moving on to item 8. I'm sure there's going to be a good conversation around item 8. Transport Committee review. This is vital to part of our work. And as we want to take buses into public control and deliver on mass transit and make sure we get the best from our rail services to deliver the integrated and affordable transport network we need. As part of our reforms to governance last year, it was agreed we'd take a closer look at the Transport Committee to make sure it's fit for purpose. And the paper today sets out our proposals from the first part of that review. So
Also, the report reflects the fact that we now have a scrutiny arrangement. We have a specific scrutiny committee for transport, and that changes the arrangements a little bit in terms of the interaction with across all of the parties. And so the review is proposing to take away the long-standing role of leader of the opposition, which tends to be a legacy of the Integrated Transport Authority, and to sort of look at how the Transport Committee and the Scrutiny Committee work in tandem to enable that sort of check and challenge approach. So what this report's doing is essentially presenting you this set of proposals to approve in principle. The next step is to take those role profiles and supply them to an independent remuneration committee to look at what the allowances should be for each of those roles. When that has been completed, then the proposals will come back to the Combined Authority for final approval, with sight of the allowances which go with the roles. So that's essentially what's in front of you this morning. Thank you, Mayor.
It's going to be an incredibly busy committee, isn't it, going forward? Any comments, questions? Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Mayor. When I first saw this proposal, I was shocked because I remember the initial conversations that had been had when we were talking about the need for the reform of the Combined Authority to reflect that it's now going to be a mayoral authority, and the need for very focused strategic subcommittees underneath this board, which would be very efficient in getting outcomes in the areas that they were discussing. And one of the things that was pointed out was that the Transport Committee was a relic left over from the old West Yorkshire structure, and it didn't fit in to how this new focused streamlined organisation was going to intended to take itself forward. And so I'm really surprised that what was considered to be an overpopulated relic, actually the intention is to increase its membership at a time when we've already enhanced the scrutiny function around transport, which is very welcome, and therefore does not require anymore the oversight of ever more elected members on a separate transport authority that could just confuse where the accountability lies. And as I said, I was shocked when this came before me, and I would not be supporting this larger organisation going forward.
Councillor Pulson.
Thank you. I'd like to echo your comments as well. I read this report and went, this seems to be against everything that was planned for the committee structure, which would be, you know, committees that were slimmed down, focused, and counting the number of members. I think we're up to about 26 members of this committee, if we start looking at them all. Surely we should be reducing the number of members of the committee. And this seems to be the only committee with 2 deputy chairs who have identical role profiles, who are doing the same thing. So it is a very peculiar proposal that's coming forward. There's one LEP board co-optee who gets a vote. Are they going to fight over that? I don't know which of them's going to get a vote. Who is going to be sitting on the committee from the LEP? Because in line with the other committees, you know, we do need to have private sector representation, industry members to feed onto the committee with their expertise, not just sitting with a load of backbench councillors. Much as their role is important, for them to sit there, they're not the experts on transport. So it needs to be a balanced committee that's focused on getting the work done and not just sitting there with far too many members on it. And what the cost of this committee is going to be going forward, who knows? So again, we fully support what Councillor Galton said, and certainly won't be supporting this current proposal, and would ask that this is taken away and re-looked at, please.
If I could just mention that the LEP role is common on all committees. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor. To be honest, I'm genuinely insulted by some of the comments that have just been made about this. I'm a former chair of the Transport Committee. The idea we weren't strategic and focused, again, is completely misplaced. The idea that councillors don't have a role on this, you know, the idea that backbench councillors can just be so easily dismissed by the Conservative members here. Again, it is a genuine insult to the hard work and commitment that the elected representatives put in West Yorkshire, and I think it reflects. I think it reflects a disregard to our democratic structures, and I hope is an indication that we're going to see future reforms to take away things like that coming from certain quarters here. I do think it is really important to reflect that the Transport Committee covers a huge amount of really important work. We've already discussed earlier the issues with local bus service, and I think it's really important we get people's views from across the county and from not just across the county in terms of the 5 districts, but different areas and different districts in that. There absolutely is a role for councillors to take to play a part of that, and I do support the review. I think it hits our objectives of working for the whole county, working for everybody, getting those views there, and actually, like I say, taking in the perspective of all our councillors in West Yorkshire. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank you for your comments about the hard work of the members of the committees. Transport has been full on, and the workload is going to increase. So I want to thank all of those members for the work they've done up to now. Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. Mayor, I should declare an interest as my husband is a member of the Discretionary Committee, so I won't participate in the vote.
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, when we were going through the consultations regarding the combined authority and the makeup of it, one of the things that came out from my council and my group as well, and other groups, was we want more representation on the combined authority on a similar model to the London Assembly. And I think that was the right thing to do, but because of the framework we were given, we had to limit the number of members involved. So I think, although I understand what my colleagues are saying, I think we need to have more members. So if they're saying that there's too many, again, I'm quite insulted, especially when I hear councillors saying that, talking about backbenchers, don't matter which party they're from, you know, they add value, and the amount of work that the Transport Committee is doing and the kind of issues that come out as a leader, I get hundreds of inquiries regarding buses. And I need somebody who can actually keep an eye on what's happening, because I can't do everything. The role of leaders is quite demanding, quite challenging. So I think it's only a good thing to actually make sure that councillors, be they backbenchers or cabinet portfolio leads, are fully engaged with the work that's taking place on this combined authority. Because that is the only way that we will actually be able to truly advocate as a sub-region to government, to make sure that we actually on a par with what the situation is in London. And the more democratically elected members we have along with the private sector, the stronger our case will be. So I can't understand the rationale when we were going through the consultation process, and the arguments that were coming forward was to actually get more member involvement. We've got more member involvement, although not as much as I'd like. And we now say that we don't want that. So I'll be supporting this, but I'll still be arguing that we want more representation of councillors in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Mayor. I welcome the changes. I'm pleased to see now that the proposals to give portfolio members a place and a voting right on this committee, I always feel it's a bit of a disconnect that we don't have at the moment. So I'm quite pleased about that. Just to make remarks that the backbench councillors don't have anything to, any input into this. I think it's quite insulting when they have a wealth of experience from our districts. But to be quite truthful, Madam Mayor, I don't really think the people of West Yorkshire is that bothered how many people sits on a committee, as long as it's delivering for transport for West Yorkshire. For when we're out on the doorstep speaking to people, that is the main issue that comes up time and time again. And I just think we need to get on with this now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mayor. I think in terms of the review, it's always good to review every committee and revisit and refresh it and look at the strategic direction that it needs to go on. I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Lewis has said, but I do agree with his comments. In terms of moving forward, there's been a lot of work put into this, and it's how it is monitored and what that committee delivers. I do take exception to backbenchers because I have worked with all your colleagues that you've nominated to those boards. They have overseen the 318 Transforming Cities bid that was successful in, the 828 CRSTS bid that we were successful in, some of the biggest amounts awarded in the country. But they spent hours on bus reform, the future bus. They spent hours on the bus expert panel. They've spent hours on the rail expert panel. They spent many, many hours on the West Yorkshire Rail Vision, and they attended all those meetings. And their voices were crucial, because actually the more political voices that can be heard, we get a better representation of the people and the people's needs across West Yorkshire. So I want to thank them. I've got a list here that I could read out, but they've been involved in active travel, not to mention mass transit that they've been working on for months and months and months, for 3 years actually, as well as all the new rail stations. We will be delivering probably White Roads, which will be one of the cheapest rail stations in the country in probably 2 years' time. They've all been involved in all these conversations. There's millions and billions of pounds going out of the West Yorkshire Transport Fund that actually everybody needs to oversee and play their part in. We've got TIU starting, so actively everybody needs to be involved. So welcome the changes, and I do wish every member who sits on that new board good luck.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. And if I could just thank you for your dedication and commitment to transport across our region. And as you say, this is about the TransPennine upgrade. It's about looking at franchising on the buses. It's about developing a strategic relationship with GB Rail. These are really big projects that are going to need a fair bit of capacity. So whilst the review was a light touch review, we've come to the conclusion that actually having that localised decision-making powers brought closer to the committee and also to spread the load is really important. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thank you, Mayor, and obviously I agree with all comments of my Labour colleagues around the table. We're about to embark, and actually in the middle of now, the biggest programme of work you have ever seen in transport in West Yorkshire. It is huge, and I'm not sure all combined authority members really see the scope and breadth of what we're about to do. It is going to massively change how we operate across the whole region. And as we said earlier, it's the delivery now we need to get on with. But having members who are across the whole region, connected with their communities, so can communicate concerns and actually give back reassurance to communities is absolutely vital now going forward. And I think we mustn't underestimate that. I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Groves has been fantastic this last few years. And the only criticism I have is we need two of her, which is why we need the two deputy roles, because it is essentially a full-time role and more actually. And I don't think we can expect Councillor Groves or her successor or whatever to actually do as much as she has been doing to achieve everything that we need to over the next few years. Including, of course, massive changes in bus transport. And we referred frequently this morning, Wakefield referred to how critical buses are for their district and for all of us, in fact. And there's going to be big changes there because obviously government are not providing that funding. The big changes that portfolio holders need to be linked in. And as I absolutely agree with you, Councillor Morley, that connectivity with the local authority and the combined authority at that decision-making level was missing. It was a missing link. So put that back in now. And I think that's really important. I think this committee will actually cost less The portfolio holders, of course, don't get any additional payment for sitting on the Transport Committee. That is part of their role, and they are the main addition to this Transport Committee. And of course, as we go forward, we know that the Remuneration Committee will put it in line with other committees, and therefore I think you'll find in the end this will cost less than the current committee. So we need to be locally connected, but we need the decision makers in there as well. It's connecting it all through, and then we get the best of both worlds, really hearing the voices of local people and delivering quickly for the region. So that's what this committee structure does, and I would urge everybody to support it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm hearing the discussion, and I think the intention of this committee to be strategic and steer is a good one. To make it larger and potentially more cumbersome is not. I also understand. I know Councillor Hinchcliffe might disagree, and that's fair, but making it more cumbersome is not. I think what I'm keen to understand more about is the local connection, and that is where I do agree with Councillor Hinchcliffe. I know when we're thinking about something that's strategic in Leeds, and I did it recently, that if there's a problem with transport, I called Kim, and that's what I could do. I knew that option was there. Now, Kim might be chair of the Transport Committee, but she had a really great oversight of this. I can't hand on heart say that if I was on this committee, that I would know the intricacies of the 117 service that Councillor Morley is talking about for Wakefield. And I can't say that anybody on this committee would. So what I'm hearing is we need to be strategic, but we need to be locally connected. Yet within this report, we say we're going to get rid of the district subcommittees that are there because they haven't been engaged with. So that's the challenge as I see it here. We can talk about the numbers all day and who's on it, but this Transport Committee needs to be strategic. It's got a job to do and it's got to deliver quickly. But how do we have that local connectivity underneath? Because this board alone can't do that.
Councillor Hinchcliffe.
So that local connectivity will still happen. It may be the district subcommittees need looking at how they work, but they still will happen. I think it just depends who wants to be on those. So I think that's something for the local members to make sure works in their local area, because absolutely I think it's a really important point of connectivity, as you suggest. So I don't want you to think that they're going to be scrapped, because I don't think they are. Dave, do you want to clarify that point?
Yes, I think what those members who've attended district consultation subcommittees will probably recall it. They're trying to be two things at once. They're trying to be a public engagement body, but also are formalised as a committee. I think what this is seeking to do really is to give a little bit more flexibility around how those district level or even sub-district level meetings could take place. So if it's appropriate for an issue to have a open public meeting, then it would be the role of that of the engagement lead to sort of coordinate and probably chair that meeting, but it wouldn't necessarily be a minuted meeting in the governance structure of the combined authority. And I think that's the link that is being proposed to be broken here. So it gives wider engagement, because one of the things we have found with the district subcommittees is difficulty actually getting a broadest inclusive range of people engaged in them. And I think this gives opportunities to try different things.
Thank you. And just to clarify, my understanding is that it's one extra person on the committee. Is that correct, Ben?
Chair, yeah, the appendix sets out the change in membership. I mean, essentially, formally the committee is larger because we're incorporating in the portfolio leads from the local authorities. In practical terms, those members are already sat around the committee. So the change in terms of substantive committee members is a marginal one.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for your comments. We'll be taking this to a vote then. So can we note the update and propose next steps, and can members confirm they approve the principle of the changes set out in the report and refer the proposed roles for assessment by the independent remuneration panel? Those in favour? Those against? Thank you, that's passed. And we should have the panel's report available for next meeting in March, when we'll agree the changes for implementation at the annual meeting in June. Thank you so much. It's always good to get a great debate going. Moving on to item 9, health tech strategy. So this is a new health tech strategy seeking our approval. It sets out our ambition to be the #1 place in the UK for entrepreneurs, innovators and industry. We know health tech innovation and health tech itself transforms health and care services. Excuse me. It improves health outcomes and patient well-being. And of course, we know it saves lives. As we emerge from the pandemic, there's deepening inequalities in health we've got to address. So this strategy is crucial to tackling those entrenched inequalities, as well as putting the region on the map, attracting investment from around the globe, creating well-paid jobs and making the most of the talent already here. The strategy focuses on the economic growth opportunities, developing new health tech innovations, business growth and highly skilled jobs, and the health and well-being outcomes we can achieve in adoption and diffusion through the health system, particularly as we emerge from the pandemic. Can I thank the partners and particularly the health tech cluster group who worked so hard on this. And I'd like to hand over to Councillor Pandor to say a few words before asking Liz Hunter, Interim Director of Policy and Development, to present the paper. Thank you, Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few points to add. The details are in the report, but just a few highlights in terms of what this is about. This is about making sure that we become, the West Yorkshire become the engine of innovation around health tech, because this is the future from my point of view. It will put us in a good stead to become one of the strongest regions, if not the strongest region. Government research has already proved that the work we're doing in West Yorkshire is adding a lot of value in terms of health tech, med tech and digital technology. It's about making sure that we bring our partners on board, working with the private sector and making sure that we have a shared narrative and a common objective in terms of addressing the health inequalities that we face. I'm really pleased that the West Yorkshire and Harrogate Healthcare Partnership is also part of this. So we're working hand in glove. The ICS system, I keep on arguing that we can't have transformation just by moving one structure into another structure. We have to make sure that it's truly transformational, and that transformation must include information technology and everything that it brings with it. And that will then put us on a very strong footing, part of a unique selling point, not just nationally, but also internationally. There's a lot of challenges that we face, and there's a positive future for health tech, and this will actually address a lot of the health inequalities that we face in our local authorities and within our region and nationally. There are barriers, but there are also action points that have been identified that will gear us up to make sure that the benefits, economic benefits are obvious, but from my point of view, there's massive health benefits that will start to address the big challenges we face. And it's also how we link into the ecosystem, which the report goes into. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a really great strategy, exciting times ahead. It will put this region on a very strong footing, and it will engage the private sector who will innovate with the public sector in making sure that the opportunities that we have both as a nation will make sure that we actually in a very strong competitive position internationally as well. So I'd like to commend this to this committee, and I hope everybody can get behind it. Thank you.
I think it's such a brilliant piece of work, and to identify health tech, something we're doing so well already. I was able to have a conversation with Penny Mordaunt, who's working for Department of Trade and talking about international development, saying, you know, this is something we're championing, and she was taking that recommendation to a trip to America, saying, you know, if people want to invest in health tech, they come to West Yorkshire. So I'm really grateful for the work, that consolidation of our identity as a place to go for health tech. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, you're right. We've got a very proud track record, which has created a great reputation for our region in health tech, and it's exactly the right kind of strategy that should be going forward. I was just wondering if because a lot of this is based on our strengths around R&D, there were some announcements within the Levelling Up paper on R&D, wasn't there? And it was talking about how it wanted to get more funding out of Oxford, Cambridge and London. But it also talked about bigging up Manchester and Birmingham and Glasgow as the places where they want to increase the amount of development between the universities and those combined authorities. And I wouldn't want to think that that kind of focus from central government might jeopardize our own success rate at getting that kind of R&D investment for ourselves. I just wondered if you could comment on that.
You did jump in, Councillor Galton, before I brought Liz in, who will obviously answer that question as she goes through her presentation, and then to Councillor Lewis. Thank you, Liz. Totally my fault, Councillor Galton.
Thank you, and thank you for those introductions. As you've already set out, health tech innovation is a real strength in the region, and it was disappointing that we weren't on that list that was announced yesterday in the Levelling Up white paper. I really hope we will be second in line to any further funding that might come, and we've got plans in place to talk to government about that, because I think having this strategy as well, if the CA endorse this today, is a good step forward in being able to demonstrate to government about how we've worked together and what we think we might want to do for the next steps on the strategy. I just want to highlight a couple of extra things from the paper. So really welcome lots of people's input into this. Chair, you mentioned the health tech cluster. That's a great working partnership as part of this, and one of the actions is around looking at strengthening that partnership as well. We've also had really great engagement from the LEP board and from the Business Economy and Innovation Committee, as Councillor Pandor said, and really grateful for people spending time outside of those committees giving us feedback on the strategy, and we think it's been strengthened because of that. So thank you to you and colleagues for that. Just to mention the kind of action plan is probably the key bit around this. So obviously the strategy sets out the strengths of the region, but we've really worked on the action plan to come up with 3 headline areas where we want to focus our attention. So the first is around strengthening that ecosystem and making sure that we work really well together. The second is making sure that we match the innovation that we want to do with what the health and care system actually needs. And I think we have got an opportunity to do that working in partnership. And thirdly, as I think many people have already said, making sure that our region is rightly recognised as a leader in this space. That's both to government as well as about direct investment into the region as well. So we can now, if you endorse the strategy today, use that to further the conversations, both with government, our UK, Innovation UK, etc., and some of those partners who we want to strengthen the R&D money coming into the region, because I think the Levelling Up white paper did recognise that more needed to come out of the South East. I'll pause there and happy to take any more questions on it, Chair.
Thank you so much, Liz. And it is and was disappointing that our R&D spend is lower than other regions in the country. So I'm hoping we can get quite a good chunk of that 40% that government are talking about of an increase in R&D outside of London and Oxford and Cambridge. So we'll be making the case for that extra cash. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it is regretful, as Councillor Galton says, that there was, I think there was more references to medieval Italy than there was Yorkshire in the Levelling Up paper. It's certainly, if nothing else, in the post-Brexit era, it's puzzling. I do think the work that you've specifically referred to, I mean, in some ways, we have led on this with our REAP work, and the suggestion of the Levelling Up paper was that we a lot of the work we've done is replicated in other areas. So I in some ways take that as a compliment, even though like I say, for us maybe recognised for that was not there. As Liz Hunter said, we're very keen that in all the money that's coming forward, we put ourselves first in line to build on the excellent work we've done to take it forward. And I do think it is something that we can point to as a real strength of our economy in terms of the development of startups. I think we've shown tremendous commitment through the work we've already done here to the diversity of people that are engaged in that work. And I think it is one of those things, Councillor Galton, as you often say, what can we get on with ourselves? And this is one of the areas where we've got a great record on that, and I hope we can. Take it forward. I like to think of myself a bit of a Renaissance man, so it will be, like I say, we will fit into the government's criteria.
Thank you, Sir Roger.
Thank you. And just to add my support to this, it's been quite a long journey since the Science Innovation Audit that spawned a lot of the work that's behind what is here before us. We are globally leading as a region when it comes to data, devices and diagnostics. So we shouldn't be, I think, faint-hearted about our opportunity here, and linking with the wider Northern Health Science Alliance around the notion of health for wealth, not just making money out of people's ill health, but actually ensuring that not only can health be improved, but economically we can deliver some very positive results. So I will be supporting this fully, and I'd like to thank colleagues for the hard work that's been put into developing this strategy at a West Yorkshire level. I wanted to just also share that before government at the moment is a wider proposal in relation to life sciences, the notion that the North as a whole could develop a complementary supercluster to that of the golden arc of Cambridge, Oxford and London, and as I said, be complementary. Jocularly, I refer to it as the platinum triangle because when it comes to the price of metals, platinum's rather more valuable than gold, but that's just as an aside. And I think we will play a pivotal role as a region within that wider ecosystem. And so I hope that very soon, this side of the Pennines will be seen as actually part of the complementary strength to the already announcements in relation to parts west of the Pennines. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I always admire your 3Ds. And we should have that branded somewhere, your diagnostics data. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose I should start by declaring an interest that I work within the tech sector, so I naturally will be very supportive of this, and I think it's an excellent report that's come forward. Some observations from it, and almost adding to what Sir Roger's said there. I think within the action plan, it'd be great to know the monitoring of this. We saw in the white paper that patents across the UK are so much more heavily weighted towards the southeast and the greater southeast area. We need to absolutely flip that on its head, and I'm really pleased that's mentioned in the report. I don't know if we've got any formal or informal goals or trackers that we're going to have to try and see if we can get more of them. Data being key, as Sir Roger said. Secondly, about making, and I think you've reaffirmed this, Liz, and it's been reaffirmed by Councillor Pandor, and I know the Mayor will, making sure that it's regional as well, and that it is all of West Yorkshire, that it doesn't just become very Leeds focused and Leeds centric. That might seem odd, a Leeds councillor saying that, but I think that that is what levelling up is all about, is trying to make sure we get out to all communities. Also in there is the need for finance and investment. It's great talking about R&D, but if the money's not coming in to invest in the companies, you're not going to be able to do anything. And I'm really pleased to see that. And I know Sir Roger and I have had conversations with the Mayor as well about making sure that investment comes to the North, private and public. And finally, an ask, I suppose, for Liz and this combined authority. Later in the year, the white paper suggested, the Levelling Up white paper suggested that we'll have another white paper on health inequalities. I think we need to hammer home to the government the role that tech and that this cluster can play in tackling health inequalities, not just in the North, but across the wider UK as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Robinson. And that's why your final point, I'm very pleased that the Inclusivity Champion is going to be part funded by health. So we definitely have, I don't have responsibilities for health, but we can do so much more using soft power and other initiatives. So you're absolutely right that that's going to be something that we need to be focused on. Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for all the great comments. And one thing that we do share is understanding of our communities, especially local ward councillors. And Sir Roger mentioned the golden triangle. I mean, you mentioned the platinum triangle. I think there's a challenge in itself there. We do know that that golden triangle, the research and development that takes place, is a challenge. We have to break through that. And maybe one of the unique selling points is actually create that platinum triangle to actually break through that barrier, because that is a big challenge. When I became the chair of the Business Innovation and Economy panel, I wasn't aware of this golden triangle. But obviously it is an issue. And maybe that's why we haven't been featured in the level white paper around the great work we're doing. But it's really good that we're all behind this, and maybe there's some work to do to actually convince government, convince the civil servants that we have the right ambition, we've got the will, we have the technology, and we will make it happen. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All very positive comments. Sir Roger.
Thank you. I just really wanted, for the benefit of colleagues, just to size the prize here. The government has announced that by 2027 they want to spend another 10 billion per annum on R&D. A wider report in the north said that actually the difference between what's spent per capita by the taxpayer on R&D in the north as compared to elsewhere, namely the greater southeast, is equivalent to 4 billion of a missing 4 billion. I think this is a great signal that not only perhaps that 4 billion will come and then an increased allocation of the remaining 6 in time, but to other colleagues' comments about making sure we are positioned within West Yorkshire to take great advantage of that, recognising the strength of our research-intensive universities in the region, which is unmatched anywhere in the north.
Thank you so much. We need to move on as time is slipping away. Are we all happy to approve the vision and direction of the partnership set out by the West Yorkshire Health Tech Strategy and adopt it as part of the strategic economic framework? We are. Thank you so much. And moving on to mass transit resourcing, item 10. We all know mass transit is a significant programme of work for the Combined Authority. A new mass transit system is going to be a key element linking communities with quick and reliable service integrated with cycling, walking, bus and rail. It's a bold investment, a transformational transport system that will benefit many generations to come. We need to move at pace, and to get the best possible outcomes and chance of success, we need to resource the work. And so I'm keen that we bring in a senior person to lead the work whose experience of working on mass transit, and this paper sets out that case. So if I could ask Ben to present the paper.
Thank you, Chair. Although I think you've picked up all the points very concisely. This paper, as members will be aware, kind of builds on a series of papers that we've had on mass transit. It builds on the mass transit vision that we launched last January in 21, the consultation that ran for last year that was overwhelmingly positive around the opportunities that mass transit provides for all the reasons that the Mayor has set out. In the background, the team were developing what's something called the strategic outline business case for the work. And we also brought in local partnerships to review where we'd got to and to set us on a path in terms of the right things we need to get in place for next steps. The bulk of their conclusions, and they're included in the paper for background information, were around resourcing and around governance. And the resourcing question was largely at the first stage addressed by the government announcing the competition for the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund, a competition that, as you know, we've submitted into, and we're now waiting for government to set out the results. But we are optimistic that the bid that we put in, which was for £200 million for mass transit work, will land well with government. I should stress that that is the first stage of a system of mass transit that we would expect to cost over £2 billion in order to give West Yorkshire the the high capacity mass transit network that it needs in the future. So this paper is very much a first step in seeking to use the funding that we expect to receive from the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund in order to appoint, as the Mayor says, a lead individual to be dedicated to and take forward this work. And the paper seeks approval for us to begin that process.
Thank you, Ben. Any comments? Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you for that, Ben. I think looking around the room and nobody disagrees with the need to ensure mass transit gets delivered across West Yorkshire. Within the recommendation, it talks about an interview panel member representation. My ask being that because of the importance of this, that there's some cross-party and cross-authority representation so that we've got everybody bought into making sure we've got the right person, the right fit for the job. And secondly, I guess a question which is about recruitment and how far and wide are we looking? Are we restricting ourselves to looking within the UK, or are we seeking to look internationally on this as well? I think there's a huge opportunity, and the right person in the right post could deliver something quite remarkable.
Ben, do you want to come back? And then Councillor Hinchcliffe. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
So I just wonder if stakeholder panels might be quite useful in this regard, actually, just so that people get an understanding of the role, etc. Because you can't have too many people on an interview panel, but I think we in the authority, our local authority, use stakeholder panels quite regularly, and it is useful actually getting their feedback.
Something to take away. Brilliant. Ben, did you want to come back?
Well, only to address the second part of Councillor Robinson's question, which is that yes, our expectation is that we'll seek some advice to find the right person for this role in a substantive case. And yes, we'll definitely be looking far and wide. As the paper says, we might want to appoint someone on an interim basis to get things going in the first instance.
It's also a unique set of skills, isn't it? That there can't be that many people out there with those skills of having delivered mass transit elsewhere. So thank you. We're happy to approve the new role of Director of West Yorkshire Mass Transit Programme and go out to recruitment. And to delegate the Managing Director the recruitment process, convening an interview panel with member representation and in consultation with the Mayor and Chair of the Transport Committee to make the appointment in accordance with the recommendation. And we might be looking at that panel's makeup, stakeholder panel. So all happy to approve? Very good. Thank you so much. Okay, quickly moving on to item 11, capital spending and project approvals. This is the schemes recommended to the Combined Authority for progression through the assurance process. So could I invite Melanie Corcoran, Director of Delivery, to present the paper? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So there's one project for consideration today for approval, and there are a number of projects that we're reporting had delegated approvals since this committee last met. So the scheme that we're considering today is part of the Corridor Improvement Programme, and the route is the A629 from Halifax Town Centre north to Ogden, and it's funded by the West Yorkshire Transport Fund, and it's seeking just over 7 million in terms of total scheme cost and 6.1 million from the Combined Authority. It's an outline business case that sets out the proposals for new and improved infrastructure to improve bus journeys and to make it easier for people to travel by bike or on foot on, around or across the A629 corridor, which will reduce delays for all road users. And the improvements will enhance connectivity in the northern part of Halifax and north of Halifax, and it will make it easier for people to access education and training facilities, employment opportunities. It will also reduce the standing traffic along that section, which will improve air quality for the local residents as well. So we're proposing that the scheme moves through outline business case, that work starts on the full business case. And as I said, the indicative approval from the Combined Authority is 6.1 million against a total scheme value of 7.01 million. And that at this stage, the sponsors are seeking development costs of 1.18 million, which will then take them through the full business case and come back for a further approval. Happy to take any questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Good stuff. Are we all happy to approve the CIP A629 North scheme to progress through the assurance process with the indicative approvals of the combined authorities funding contribution for delivery and development costs and approval of future assurance pathways and approval route? We are very good. Thank you all so much. Moving on. We are now picking up speed towards the end of the meeting, going on to the Assurance Framework Review, item 12. This report seeks approval for proposed revisions to Leeds City Region Local Assurance Framework arising from the 2022 annual review. I wonder if I could hand over to Melanie again to present the paper. Melanie.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And as you've said, it's a light touch review this time round. But the purpose of the Leeds City Region Assurance Framework is to ensure that we've got the necessary systems and the processes in place to manage our funding effectively. So we focus on ensuring the successful delivery of the Strategic Economic Framework and the West Yorkshire Investment Strategy, and ensure that the necessary practices and standards are implemented that provide government, combined authority, the LEP, our local partners with the assurance that decisions that are being made on our funding are transparent and they deliver value for money. So it's an important document that clearly sets that out and is available for our partners and people that we work with to view online. We have this requirement to submit the revised version of this plan annually to government by the 28th of February. So we have made some changes to it, primarily as a result of us now having a mayor in post. We've also updated because we've now got the West Yorkshire Investment Strategy. We've reflected on the changes to the committee structure. We've reflected on some changes to economic services grants and AEB approvals. And we are introducing carbon assessment at each stage within our appraisal. The value for money assessment has also broadened to include specific strategic goals. So at times, some of our transport schemes do have a BCR that is below 1, and DFT and Treasury have looked at how they can update the Green Book to reflect on some of those strategic priorities where the BCR is actually lower than 1. So we do take that into consideration, and we've reflected that in the document. So the recommendation is to review and approve the proposed revisions, and then to delegate to the LEP Chief Exec, the MD, in consultation with the LEP Chair and the Combined Authority Chair, to approve the final version of this for submission to government on the 28th of February. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. We're all happy to approve. Thank you so much. Moving on. Item 13, the appointment of external auditors. Caroline is unwell, so Angela is going to take this item, and the paper's asking the combined authority to approve how we appoint external auditors in the future. Angela.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. We are required to decide how to appoint external auditors from 2023 onwards. We currently follow the opt-in arrangements operated by Public Sector Auditor Appointments Limited. Governance and Audit Committee considered this at the members considered it at their last meeting and recommended that we continue with this approach. If we don't do that, we have to go through our own procurement, which a very, very small number of local authorities have done. I think it's something like 98 or 99% of local authorities have followed the PSAA route for the current period. So you are asked to consider, are you happy to accept the recommendation from Governance and Audit that we continue the opt-in arrangements with PSAA?
And it's effective from April 2023.
It is.
All happy to approve? Great stuff. Thank you. Moving on to item 14, Members' Code of Conduct, the review of procedure. And following guidance issued by the Local Government Association, the Combined Authorities procedure for considering complaints alleging a failure to comply with the Code of Conduct has been amended to provide greater clarity and transparency to the process. All very welcome. Angela.
Thank you. Again, this had some discussion at Governance and Audit. It is a tidying up. We have this already. This is a tidying up. It's taking on board some recent guidance from LGA. governance and audit were comfortable with this, asked for some for a flow chart to be added to make it really clear what the process was, and it's then brought here today if you're happy to approve it, or if you have any questions, happy to take them.
Thank you. It's a very detailed flowchart. Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Only one, if that's okay, Angela, sorry. Page 225, I think it's item 15 within the Code of Conduct. It says that if a complainant alleges that a criminal offence has been committed, the monitoring officer may direct any such complaint to the West Yorkshire Police. Before making this decision, the monitoring officer may consult with the Mayor and others. I am not suggesting that it would be or could be, but if that person was the Mayor, would you consult them?
Very good question. What do you know about me, Councillor?
As I wanted to reaffirm, I am not saying that is the.
I think this the wording is may, and I think the monitoring officer would exercise her judgment in what the appropriate route was for this in such a very, very unlikely scenario.
Thank you. We are happy to approve. Yes, good stuff. Thank you all. So moving on, I think to the final item 15, the minutes for information, but I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. It's been an important day for us as a team to have our first budget. Thank you for your contributions. And this is our hope that we can do our own levelling up in West Yorkshire and set the direction of travel for the next few years. So thank you all so much. Can I remind you that the next meeting is March the 17th and close the meeting. So thank you. Have a good afternoon. Thanks all.